Hello and welcome once again to the Facts Matter podcast, brought to you by the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. We have been taking a comprehensive view of the question, which will be asked of Michigan voters November 3rd, of whether to have a constitutional convention, a top-to-bottom reopening of the Michigan Constitution, drafted back in 1963, and all the various things that could entail. Well, today we're looking at Article VIII, which addresses education, and I, as always, joined by Eric Lupher, president of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. This is potentially a meaty one, Eric, but it's not something that's received a lot of attention in terms of constitutional amendment activity.
It hasn't gotten a lot of activity with actual proposals, but there's been a whole lot of discussion about how we govern K-12 education, how we choose our governing boards of U of M, MSU, and Wayne State, and there's a lot of discussion about education. It's just we haven't had that many proposals actually make it on the ballot.
So as we look ahead, should Michigan voters decide to have a con at the ballot box, one of the things that by putting education into its own article, the state of Michigan basically declared this is a very high priority, and we see this as a fundamental responsibility of the state. But there is talk of making this a right, a fundamental right. How far of a reach is that, and what would the consequences be?
We see this in many other states. The Constitution, every state constitution has an article dedicated to education. Again, it really speaks to the importance of that particular governmental service relative to police and public works and economic development, a whole bunch of other things. So it really speaks to that. The Michigan Constitution uses language more or less lifted from the Northwest Ordinance, saying that education shall forever be encouraged, and it's the state's responsibility to make sure education's available to every young person in the state. But it doesn't use language that many other states have in their constitution that really creates a responsibility of the state to provide either the funding for education or how do you measure and ensure an adequate education. So it could be as simple as putting in some of those key words if keep everything the same but change a few things, and that could be triggering. There are some. We had a case in 2020 in the Detroit Public Schools
Federal,
where they said, our kids are coming out of 12 years not literate, and something is failing here, and the end result was a settlement out of court where the state agreed to pony up some more money, and so it became non-binding, and we don't know how far that would have gone. But other efforts have failed, that there just isn't those key words in our state constitution, thorough and efficient, high quality, adequate, trigger words like that, that a court might look at and say, it was the intent of the constitutional founders, the writers of that document, that there be some minimum level of funding or some minimum level of achievement of the students, and if you're not doing that, then the state would have the courts would have the ability to require more funding or bring about changes.
I mean, it would create, and I covered that case back in 2020, and but essentially, if you make it a fundamental right, it could create a new liability standard for districts based on the attainment for the average student, for instance. So could it open the door to, or the floodgates to lawsuits saying you failed this group of kids and now you must address this? It kind of gets to the whole idea of accountability, doesn't it?
It does get to the idea of accountability. As Craig Thiel authored this, he's our school finance guru. And as we were going through drafts of this paper, thinking about this, I pulled back a little bit. I said, the state has that responsibility now. They don't really need the court to tell them that some minimum level of funding is needed and some level of adequacy is funded. In 1994, we saw that with Proposal A, what
Right.
came to be Proposal A, where the state took on a much greater responsibility for funding. Now we have equal per student funding of our foundation grant for every student. And the state's really leaning into funding of at-risk students, people in poverty, people, English second language students, things like that. So the question that the delegates would have to wrangle with, how much do we need the constitutional language to give that kick in the pants versus the legislature, our school superintendents, the State Board of Education really leaning into our system isn't working for everyone and something needs to be done to fix it.
So we do know that in terms of funding, the Proposal A did establish a floor, but it was based in $1995. And so I don't know how meaningful that is going forward. We do have some new standards for funding adequacy. Do we need to build those into the Constitution? Is that something that delegates might want to do?
Yeah, I mean, some of our first papers in this series really leaned into what a good Constitution looks like, and we really thought about the idea of being evergreen and something that lasts throughout the years. So in 1994, they thought they were addressing this by putting in a funding floor. They,
but it's not indexed.
Might argue a failure in how they worded that. And who's to say that a constitutional convention in 2027, 2028 would get that wording better? We do need to lean into that, and I think having education in the Constitution as a standalone article speaks to the significance of it. Some delegates might feel like putting in that sort of funding floor, leaning into the idea that every student is entitled to a quality education, might do more to lift those with the least amongst us, and I strong believer in the idea we're only as strong as our weakest link, and constitutional language might reflect that in some way.
Right. Well, I mean, they could add something as simple as just indexing the floor to the rate of inflation, or establishing a framework for standardizing the weighting for at-risk districts.
Yeah, the hard part when we look at these lawsuits in other states is it's really hard to measure adequacy. It's sort of a eye of the beholder type thing.
Yeah, so subjective.
What it means to one person and what it means to the next person will not always be equal. So this is certainly going to be something that, if there's a constitutional convention, they'll spend some time talking about.
As you point out in the paper, private school choice is a theme that has gained a lot of traction, and it could be a likely avenue of discussion if we have a con in 28. The idea of having public dollars support families who want to send their children to private schools, call it parochial aid. It was prohibited under the Blaine Amendment. There were attempts to change the Blaine Amendment that were struck down rather forcefully by voters 25 years ago.
In 2000. Right.
So a lot of time has passed since then. Is that something that may be revisited?
For sure, it's going to be revisited. We see a lot of states leaning into vouchers for students to go to private schools. Some of those might be religious based. They are not all. Michigan's prohibition on funding of private schools has withstood the test of lawsuits because it's not specifically written to prohibit the funding of students going to a religious school. It's just a flat out blank restriction. So the way we educate students is evolving. The days of yore where everyone showed up in school, and we're seeing more kids private schooled. We're seeing more students in private schools of some sort. Michigan is different from many other states, and to this extent, the delegates are going to have to wrangle with this. Is this something that should be lifted, should be evolved in some way? And what does that do, given that the voters spoke 25 years ago, but spoke rather forcefully?
Right.
That they didn't feel that way.
2-1, I think.
How will this affect how people see the Constitution? Is that a go no go for some people?
We mentioned the word accountability a little bit earlier. As you lay out in your paper, the current governance in the state of Michigan is we have a state superintendent of public instruction. We have a state board of education. I think if you ask the average Michigander to name any of those individuals, they may even express surprise that we have those institutions because they know their local school board so much better. There seems to be at least no chain of accountability when schools underperform. Is that something that might be addressed, that you either strengthen the hand of the governor to have greater appointment powers so that the buck stops somewhere? What might we see in terms of strengthening accountability?
I think if there is a constitutional convention, everything we've discussed so far will be part of the conversation, but this will be the main point of conversation. It has been well documented that our students are not achieving it to a great extent. Funding has gone up every year. Some may argue whether that's sufficient or not. But a lot of eyes turn to the governance of the school system. As you say, we have the legislature involved. We have the independent state board of education. We have a state superintendent of education. We have the governor. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's not clear who's responsible for what roles.
And we have this longstanding tradition of honoring local control of schools. So top-down management, it runs headlong into that.
So as you say, I think part of the question will be, do we need a independent state board of education? If, the old journalist follow the dollar, if the legislature controls the dollar, then, if they're ultimately making decisions on education. Do we need an independent state board of education? If we do, should they be independently elected or appointed by the governor? Should the legislature have some say in who appears on that body? They ultimately appoint the superintendent of public education, who serves on the governor's cabinet, but is independently chosen. It's not a gubernatorial appointment. Mm-hmm. Michigan is not alone in that sort of arrangement, but if the governor is in charge of the general administration of the state, should he or she have greater say on the who's in charge of running the Department of Education and who's setting policy, leading policy for the state? Should that be appointed by the governor, independently elected? Should the legislature have some say, the sort of a Senate confirmation process?
Right.
So there's a lot of meat there. There's a lot to look at, what other states are doing. There's a lot of history in Michigan. We've varied back and forth in how we've done this through our different constitutions. It'll certainly be a time-consuming element of the Committee on Education if there is a constitutional convention.
When we were at the Mackinac Policy Conference, the wildfire up there wasn't from Canada. It was from the University Board of Trustees of the Michigan State University. Kevin Guskowitz has since come back to Sparty Land, but we've got a real issue there with this notion of having our 4 Michigan research institutes governed by an elected board, and everybody else has an appointed board, and they're hard to get rid of when they fail to deliver, or when they get involved in this infighting like we saw at Michigan State. We have some similar problems at U of M as well. How meaty would that topic be in terms of saying whether or not this hybrid, this unusual way of electing university governance is addressed?
Right. So as you say, we have independently elected boards for U of M, Michigan State, and Wayne State. The other 12 schools, the governor appoints the board. And this is proven to be an issue of contention. We see it at the 3 flagship schools, that there's seemingly a constant friction between the board and the president that they choose.
Right.
So
and injecting politics into something that should be really an apolitical exercise. Everybody should be rowing in the direction of the best interest of the institution. But help me with something here. How did we get here in the first place? Why did we make those 3 universities, and I added one in, forgive me, those 3 universities an elected scenario? What did we feel was the benefit of doing that at the time, or do we remember?
Well, it was about the independence of the University of Michigan. This dates back to 1850 Constitution, and so it goes back to almost the very beginning. The idea that we had this university that stood amongst the major schools in the nation, and giving it the latitude and ability to set its own policy. Along comes Michigan State College at the time, and the premier land-grant university in the state, and it's sort of over time followed in U of M's footsteps in gaining its independence, and then later Wayne State in a similar way. So it is a bit of an accident of history that they ended up this way, but in 1963, they for sure, 61, 62, leading up to the 63 Constitution, had the ability to take a step back and look at how things were operating. And ultimately, they decided that these 3 schools should continue to have their independence. So, there are 2 thoughts, right? We can all agree that this should be sort of an apolitical exercise, and how are we doing this? And Michigan is really the outlier in having this independently elected just for the flagship schools. We also look at down in Florida, not independently elected schools, but appointed by the governor, and those people have really taken a very right-wing.
It's become more politicized.
Politicized. That's a good way to put it. You look at other schools, maybe you find examples of governors pushing it way to the left, but again, very politicized in ways that you wouldn't think that would be optimal. So,
well, we've seen it to some degree in California. I mean, where university staffers weren't allowed to travel to states that didn't align with the political priorities of the state of
Right.
California.
So there's no perfect model. For sure, this is going to get a lot of attention, as we just talked about the K-12 governance, trying to find a better fix that will create some more stability in our flagship schools, get leadership that's willing to stick around for a little while, and return Michigan to being a leader in higher education in some ways. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we'll see what they come up with if there is a constitutional convention.
Okay, and finally, I don't want to give the community colleges the short end of the stick here. Their governance could also become an issue because it's more localized, correct?
It is. At the time the last constitutional convention was meeting, we had some of the junior colleges that were sort of nascent, just in their very infancy. The community colleges didn't get much attention in our current constitution. So we have legislatively developed this form of continuing higher education. And the way it's been developed, it's really been left to the local communities, the local schools, to decide, do they want to be part of these community colleges. So there's parts of the state that are not part of a community college, and if you're a high school senior trying to decide what to do with the next stage of your life, you're looking at out of district tuition. And then you look at it at the state level, there isn't a clear line of ascension, a clear line of responsibility within the Department of Education, within the State Board of Education, to align K-12 education with community college and higher education. So we think, if there is a constitutional convention, they're going to look at what other states are doing, how to align the governance, how to align the curriculum development so
Right.
that our K-12 students are better able to feed into, be ready, college ready when they graduate 12th grade and ready to succeed. That starts with governance at the very top and having a uniform system.
Well, and
Throughout.
doesn't it open the door to greater coordination? Because right now this is so decentralized that you don't have a lot of coordination beyond the K-12 community college intersection there. If you presume that they're going to go on to a four-year institution, perhaps, and that the community colleges are a gateway, you do need to have some coordination between those four-year universities and two-year universities, and it may be happening organically. But from a governance standpoint, wouldn't that behoove us to build those connections into the system?
That's the argument. That's for sure what we'll want to look at other states and see, those states that have that type of a system, how well does it work? Is it worth emulating? What is to be gained by adding that system in? The community colleges in some way have piggybacked on the independence of the higher education, the university system. And there has been coordination. We shouldn't sell that short. The item of study for the Constitutional Convention would greater improved governance at the state level facilitate that even more and move that into a better position for our students to fully move through the higher education system.
Finally, any last Article VIII thoughts?
No, just to summarize, again, really it's only education as a public service that gets its own article in the Constitution. It really speaks to the importance of it. Michigan has not been achieving in a major way through K-12 education, and while we have great universities, they're bleeding students and trying to figure out how to keep themselves afloat. So it's pretty clear if we did have a constitutional convention that we will want to give a lot of attention to should that article continue? Should we continue to have education as a standalone article in the Constitution? And if we do, how do we address funding? How do we address governance? How do we put the state on a path to prosperity moving forward?
All right. Well, that wraps up the Article 8 conversation, and we invite our listeners and viewers to check out the other. There are going to be 11 sections, I think, to this ultimately, but
this is the 11th one. We'll have
this is
15 in total, so we have 4 more to go, I guess, and then we plan to have that final one published right around the time people are receiving their absentee ballots for those people voting absentee in September, and they'll have everything before them as they see that proposal 1 on the November ballot should we have a constitutional convention.
Well, and finally, I want to give you an opportunity to crow, Eric. I know over the past week that there is a group that acknowledges fine researchers in the field that we're in, and the Citizens Research Council of Michigan got a nice bouquet of roses thrown our way.
We did. The Governmental Research Association is an association of organizations like ours in more than half the states. They are equally involved in thinking about the finance and governance of their state and local governments and trying to make things better for their own populations. They have a number of categories that we nominate. You can nominate your own work, and we were recognized in policy achievement for the work that we did over the last couple of years dealing with the issue of pork barrel spending. And you can go back and look at those on our website. The crux of it was that we said politicians are going to politic. We're never going to get rid of pork barrel spending, but there needs to be sunshine in the process, that we should know which legislators are asking for the funding, what it's going to be used for. Is it being used only by governments and nonprofit entities, or can we make sure it's not going to private companies? There should be some ability, some period of time between when the ask is and the actual passage of the budget, so people can ask questions and understand what the set aside is all about. And in fact, the legislature took that up through legislative rule and then enacted a law to make it so. And so
that's kind of what the mission is all about,
something
isn't
to
it?
good feel about. Yes.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to the team, and that was a nice little thing in my inbox this week. So I wanted to make sure that we let folks know about it, because those are fun moments for the CRC team.
It's an important message to those that tune in that your dollars are really achieving things. We're not just writing papers and hoping people notice that we are moving the needle and making the state a better place. And we can do that only with the support of businesses and individuals to support our work.
Which leads us to the coda that we have been using for the past several podcasts, which is, if you feel that this is a beneficial service to you as a citizen, maybe tell your neighbors about us, have them join us through Spotify, through Apple Podcasts, or through YouTube, or at the crcmich.org website. And in the meantime, when you see the little donate button there on the website, you might want to throw a few coins in the pot to keep the mission alive. Eric, thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
All right. And we'll see you next time on the #Facts Matter podcast. Till then, I'm Guy Gordon. Take care.
The Citizens Research Council of Michigan has been providing lawmakers, academics, the media, philanthropists, business leaders, voters, and all Michiganders with factual, unbiased, independent information on significant issues concerning state and local government organization and finance. For over a century, our research is available to you. Go online at crcmich.org and on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and download our research. Check out our numerous papers and blogs, and listen to our podcasts. And while you're there, please consider supporting our research with a donation. This has been a Facts Matter podcast, a presentation of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan.